this is Dr. Gina. What voices have you been listening to? You know those voices in your head? Most of them sound like you, then some of them don't. Where do they come from? Some people's like, the devil made me do it. But you know what? Most of the time the devil don't even have to take time with us because we have developed our own voice system. Sometimes I have patients be like, well, you know, I heard you in my head. So sometimes other people can get in your head. Who's the first people to get in our heads? Yeah, it's our parents. Have you ever heard parent tapes in your voice? They can be good, bad, and ugly, but you hear your parents' voice. Guess what? That's because that is the first developmental stage of superego. That's what Freud would call it. It's the moral development stage. So in your early life, when you're forming meaning, your parents are like, you need to do this, you don't do this, it's wrong to do this, it's right to do that. And that's stuck in your head. That's early development. But we also have some development from other things. Peers maybe that say things over and over. If you were bullied, you hear those bully tapes in your head. Or let's say that you're in a sports team and you've got a coach and you have him for 3 or 4 years. That coach tape's in your head. Well, some tapes are really great tapes. They're encouraging tapes. And some tapes are really critical and they pressure us into thinking we're less than. So we have to begin to identify. I wanted to talk about, though, a very, very important voice in our head, and that is the caveman, cavewoman voice in our head. Yes, it's actually our primitive brain, and the thing is that's in your own voice. But guess what? It's not your higher self. It is the part of you that wants things status quo, whether the status quo is great or whether the status quo is not so great. Whatever is happening at the time, that becomes our normal. And the primitive brain always wants to stay what is normal. It does the least path of resistance. Now, guess what else lies in the primitive brain? Addictions lie in the primitive brain. And so those voices that lie in the primitive brain are typically the things that aren't pushing you to your higher self. It will be your own voice, but the voice will be somewhat menacing and a little provocative and discouraging and remind you of things that are not necessarily good. Why? Because it will throw you into an addictive behavior. Like something happens and you relate it to an old time of grief and loss, and then you're like, oh, I just need to go have a drink, or oh, I just need to go watch TV, or let me just eat some more, because it's primitive. It drives you to your lower self, least path of resistance, whatever feels good, no matter what happens as the end result. It does not think the bigger picture of what you ultimately want. So there is a trick, and I've worked with a lot of addictions over the years, and one of the tricks is just recognizing the voice. What is it provoking you to do? What are the sounds of that voice, and is it causing you to drive you to do behaviors that aren't ultimately in your best interests? So you really have the ability to create some new voices in there, hold on to the old voices that are good, and then recognize when the primitive brain is driving you. Yes, does the devil sometimes speak, but not often. You've got all these other voices that are affecting and influencing your life. Just begin to create some new ones and hang on to the good old ones and get on your way. This is Dr. G.